Kethfer sat in the white chair, his three eyes staring at the wall. The military hospital room was quiet, except for the soft hum of air filters. His scaled hand shook slightly as he held a cup of warm liquid. The liquid had no taste, but it helped calm his nerves. Dr. Yilmoth entered the room with a datapad in her hands. She was a small Zephyrian, with gentle movements and a kind voice. She had been trying to help Kethfer for many weeks now. Nightmares still came every night, and the memories would not leave him alone. "Good morning, Kethfer," she said softly. "How are you feeling today?" Kethfer looked at her with tired eyes. "The same, doctor. The dreams came again last night. I see their faces. I hear their voices. They will not leave me in peace." Dr. Yilmoth sat down across from him. "I know this is difficult, but talking about what happened might help." The High Command wants an official record of the events on New Haven. Your experience could save other soldiers from going through what you did. Kethfer was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to speak in a low voice. "It started 6 months ago. I was a senior warrior in the 3rd Battle Group. We had just finished conquering the Kelmar system. It was easy work. The Kelmar people surrendered after we destroyed one of their cities. That is how it always went with other species. Show them our power, and they would give up." He paused to drink from his cup. His hands were steadier now. "Commander, Vextal called us to the main briefing room on the command ship. There were maybe 50 of us there. All the squad leaders and senior warriors. We thought it would be another easy mission. We had done so many before." Dr. Yilmoth made notes on her pad. "Tell me about the briefing. What did Command tell you about the humans?" Kethfer's eyes grew distant as he remembered. The room was full of confidence that day. Everyone was talking and laughing. "We had just received bonus pay from the Kelmar. Conquest. Some warriors were already planning how to spend their earnings." He shifted in his chair. Commander Vextal stood at the front of the room with a large display screen behind him. He looked pleased, like someone who had just been given good news. "He told us we had a new assignment. Small colony world called New Haven." The memories came back clearly now. Kethfer could see the briefing room in his mind. The blue lights from the display screens, the smell of recycled air, the sound of warriors joking with each other. The commander showed us pictures of the planet. It was green and blue with white clouds. It looked peaceful, beautiful even. He said it was home to about 50,000 humans. They had been there for maybe 20 years? Dr. Yilmoth looked up from her notes. "What did the intelligence reports say about human capabilities?" "That was the problem, Doctor. The reports made them sound weak, fragile. The intelligence officers said human bones break easily. Their skin tears from small cuts. They can only live in a narrow range of temperatures. They need a specific mix of gases to breathe. Compared to us, they seemed helpless." Kethfer stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, he could see other Zephyrian soldiers walking between buildings. They looked normal, happy. They had not been to New Haven. The weapons report was even more encouraging. Humans used simple projectile weapons, small metal pieces fired by chemical explosions. Their ships were slow and clumsy. They had no plasma technology, no energy shields, no particle beams. Commander Vextal said it would be like fighting with children. He turned back to face Dr. Yilmoth. There were questions from the warriors, mostly about how long the mission would take. Asked if there would be any real fighting. Others wanted to know about the colonial resources we could claim. Everyone expected an easy victory. The commander laughed at the questions. He said we would probably be done in 3 days, maybe less. He only assigned 1 battle group to the mission. Usually we sent 3 or 4 groups to conquer a world. For the humans, he thought 1 was too many. Dr. Yilmoth wrote more notes. "Did anything in the briefing suggest the humans might be different from other species?" Kethfer sat back down. This was the part that had bothered him from the beginning, even before the fighting started. There was something strange in the surveillance videos. Intelligence teams had been watching New Haven for several weeks before the briefing. They showed us recordings of human daily life. Most species, when they sense danger, they panic. They run, they hide, they look for ways to escape. He paused, his 3 eyes blinking slowly. But the humans were different. The videos showed them working together, building things, digging. They were preparing for something. Their leader, a man named Jake Morrison, was seen talking to groups of humans. He did not look afraid. He looked determined. In one video, we saw human children being moved from the main settlement to caves in the mountains. The adults were not running away. They were sending their young ones to safety while they stayed behind. This should have been our first warning. Yilmuth looked concerned. Did anyone question this behavior during the briefing? Junior Officer Trelonak mentioned it. He said it was unusual for a species to prepare for a fight they could not win. Commander Vextal dismissed his concerns, said humans were probably too stupid to understand how outmatched they were. Kethaver's voice grew quieter. The commander showed us more intelligence data. Human technology was centuries behind ours. Their population was small. They had no allies in the galaxy. On paper, it looked like the easiest conquest in Zephyrian history. But there was something else in those videos that none of us understood at the time. The humans were not just preparing defenses. They were preparing to die. You could see it in their faces. They knew they would probably lose, but they were going to fight anyway. He stood up again and walked around the small room. In our culture, when defeat is certain, the logical choice is surrender. You live to fight another day. You preserve your life and the lives of your soldiers. It is basic military strategy. The humans seemed to follow different rules. They were making choices. That would lead to their deaths, but they made those choices anyway. I remember thinking it was a form of madness. How could an intelligent species choose death over survival? Dr. Yilmuth set down her datapad. What happened after the briefing? We prepared for deployment. It took 2 weeks to load the ships and travel to New Haven. During that time, the intelligence reports kept coming. The humans were still building defenses, still moving civilians to safety, still preparing for a war they could not win. Kethaver looked out the window again. Some of the younger warriors were excited. They had never seen real combat. They thought it would be easy glory. Veteran soldiers like me were more careful, but we still expected a quick victory. Before we reached New Haven, I had trouble sleeping. Not because I was afraid of the humans, it's because something felt wrong. All my years of military experience told me that enemies who are not afraid of death are the most dangerous enemies of all. He turned back to Dr. Yilmuth with haunted eyes. I was right to be worried, Doctor. I had no idea how right I was. None of us did. We thought we were going to conquer a weak colony world. Instead, we were about to learn what happens when you threaten something humans care about. Dr. Yilmuth closed her notes. That is enough for today, Kethaver. You have done well. Tomorrow, we will talk about what happened when you reached New Haven. Kethaver nodded slowly. Yes, Doctor. Tomorrow, I will tell you about the day we learned that humans do not fight wars the same way other species do. The day we learned what the word terror really means. Dr. Yilmuth entered the hospital room the next morning to find Kethaver already awake. He was sitting by the window, staring at the sky. His 3 eyes looked tired, as if he had not slept well. Good morning, Kethaver. You ready to continue our talk? Kethaver turned to face her. I have been thinking about that day all night, Doctor, about the landing, about what we found when we got to New Haven. I keep wondering if we could have done something different. Dr. Yilmuth sat down with her datapad ready. Tell me about the first day of the invasion. What happened when your forces reached the planet? Kethaver was quiet for a moment. Then he began to speak. We arrived at New Haven early in the morning. The planet looked even more beautiful from space than in the pictures. Green forests, blue oceans, white clouds. It seemed like a peaceful place, a place where nothing bad could happen. He paused to collect his thoughts. Commander Vextal ordered the first wave of dropships to land near the main human settlement. I was in the 3rd ship with my squad. We expected the humans to surrender. As soon as they saw our forces, that is what always happened with other species. Dr. Yilmuth made notes as he spoke. What was different this time? Everything was different, Doctor. From the very first moment, nothing went as planned. Our dropships came down in a field outside the town. Landing should have been easy. The area looked clear from our scans. Kethaver stood up and began walking around the room. But as soon as we landed, we came under fire. Not random shooting. Organized, planned attacks. The humans had been waiting for us. They knew exactly where we would land. He stopped walking and looked directly at Dr. Yilmuth. That was our first shock. How did they know? Our landing zones were chosen at the last minute. There was no way. They could have predicted where we would come down. But somehow they were ready. The human weapons were supposed to be primitive, simple projectile guns that could not hurt our armor. But these humans were not using simple weapons. They had explosives, weapons that could damage our ships, devices that could jam our communications. Dr. Yilmoth looked up from her notes. Where did they get advanced weapons? We never found out, Doctor. Maybe they built them. Maybe they traded. For them, maybe they stole them from somewhere. All we knew was that our intelligence reports were wrong. Very wrong. I first sat back down, his hands shaking slightly. But the weapons were not the worst part. The worst part was how the humans fought. I had been in many battles before. I knew how intelligent species behave in combat. When they are hurt, they retreat. When they are outnumbered, they surrender. When their position is hopeless, they run away. He looked out the window again. The humans did none of these things. I watched a human soldier named Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez get hit by plasma fire. The blast should have killed him. Instead, he kept fighting. He used his own body to shield other humans while they moved to better positions. There was a human woman, Sergeant Lisa Carter. She led a squad of maybe 8 soldiers. A unit outnumbered them 3-1. We had better weapons and better armor. But she fought like she had the advantage. She moved her people around the battlefield like she could see the future. Dr. Yilmoth stopped writing. What do you mean, she could see the future? She seemed to know what we were going to do before we did it. When we tried to flank her position, her soldiers were already waiting. When we called for air support, her people had anti-aircraft weapons ready. It was like fighting someone who had studied our tactics for years. Kethfer's voice grew quieter. Then I saw something that still gives me nightmares. A human soldier named Corporal Danny Wright was badly wounded. He could not walk or fight. In any normal army, his squad would leave him behind to save themselves. That is basic military sense. He paused, his 3 eyes blinking slowly. But these humans did the opposite. Instead of leaving him, they risked their lives to save him. 3 soldiers ran through enemy fire to reach him. They could have been killed. They should have been killed. But they did it anyway. Why would they do such a thing, Doctor? It made no military sense. 1 wounded soldier was not worth the lives of 3 healthy ones. But the humans did not seem to think that way. Dr. Yilmoth wrote more notes. What happened next? The fighting got worse. We pushed deeper into the town, expecting the humans to fall back. Instead, they fought harder. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a trap. They used things I had never seen before. In warfare, Kethfer stood up again and walked to the window. They turned civilian equipment into weapons. Construction machines became tanks. Medical supplies became explosives. Even their children's toys were used to distract our sensors. These humans could make anything into a tool of war. But the strangest thing was their leader, Captain Amy Foster. She was in charge of the town's defenses. When we surrounded the main square, she had a choice. She could surrender and save the lives of her soldiers, or she could fight and watch them all die. He turned back to face Dr. Yilmoth. She chose to fight. Ow. But not just fight. She led a charge directly at our strongest position. It was suicide. There was no way her people could win. But she did it anyway, and her soldiers followed her. I watched her run toward our plasma cannons with nothing but a rifle and a determination I had never seen before. She was not trying to win the battle. She was trying to buy time for civilians to escape. She traded her life and the lives of her soldiers for a few more minutes. Dr. Yilmoth looked disturbed. Did this tactic work? That is the terrible part, Doctor. It did work. While Captain Foster and her people died attacking our position, other humans were moving civilians too. Safety. Children, elderly people, wounded soldiers. They all escaped because of her sacrifice. Kethfer sat down heavily in his chair. Then there was Private First Class Tony Mitchell. He was alone in a building that controlled the main road into town. We needed that road to bring in heavy equipment. 1 human soldier should not have been able to stop an entire armored column, but he did stop us. For 6 hours, he held that position by himself. We sent squad after squad to remove him. He killed or wounded dozens of our warriors. When we finally broke through, we found him dead at his post, still holding his weapon. The building was destroyed. He was badly wounded. He had no food, no water, no hope of rescue. But he never gave up. He never retreated. He fought until the very end. Dr. Yilmuth set down her datapad. This behavior seems very different from other species you have encountered. That is exactly right, Doctor. Every other species we had fought followed logical patterns. They wanted to survive. They made rational decisions. They knew when they were beaten. Kethfer's voice became almost a whisper. But humans seemed to operate by different rules. Rules that made no sense to us. They would rather die than surrender. They would sacrifice themselves for strangers. They fought not just with weapons, but with something else, something we did not understand. The worst moment came when we captured the communications center. Major Kate Sullivan was the officer in charge. We had her surrounded. Her position was hopeless. All she had to do was surrender, and she would live. He paused, his hands trembling. Instead, she sent a message to her own artillery units. She gave them the coordinates of her own position and ordered them to fire. She killed herself and most of my squad to stop us from using the communications equipment. Her last words were not a plea for help or mercy. They were instructions to other humans on how to keep fighting. Even in death, she was still trying. To win the war, Dr. Yilmuth closed her notes. That is enough for today, Kethfer. This must be very difficult to remember. Kethfer nodded slowly. Tomorrow, Doctor, I will tell you about what happened when we went underground. When we learned that killing humans does not stop them from fighting. It just makes the ones who are left more dangerous. Dr. Yilmuth found Kethfer standing at the window when she arrived the next morning. He was not moving, just staring outside with all three eyes focused on something far away. She could see his reflection in the glass, and his face looked older than it had the day before. Kethfer, are you ready to continue? He turned slowly, as if waking from a dream. I was thinking about the tunnels, Doctor, about what we found down there, about the things those humans did in the dark. Dr. Yilmuth sat down and prepared her datapad. Tell me about the underground resistance. Kethfer moved to his chair but did not sit. Instead, he stood behind it, gripping the back with his scaled hands. After we took the surface of the town, Commander Vexdal thought the hard fighting was over. We controlled all the buildings. It destroyed their military positions. Their organized resistance was broken, or so we thought. He finally sat down, but his posture remained tense. That night, strange things began to happen. Our supply convoys were attacked by enemies who appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Our communication equipment stopped working. Our vehicles broke down for no clear reason. At first, we thought it was just normal equipment failure. Machines break down during combat. But then our engineers found something disturbing. The equipment had been sabotaged. Someone with detailed knowledge of Zephyrian technology was deliberately damaging our systems. Dr. Yilmuth looked up from her notes. How was this possible? Humans were supposed to have primitive technology. That is what we could not understand. Doctor, the sabotage was too precise, too clever. Someone knew exactly which components to damage to cause maximum problems. They understood our systems better than some of our own technicians. Kethfer stood up and began pacing around the small room. We soon discovered that the humans had built a network of tunnels under their town. Not simple hiding places, but a complete underground city. They had workshops, medical facilities, communication centers, weapons storage areas. They had been preparing for this war for months, maybe years. The man leading this underground resistance was an engineer named Ben Parker. Before the war, he had worked in the colony's mining operations. He knew how to dig tunnels, how to move heavy equipment, how to build things underground. Dr. Yilmuth wrote quickly to keep up with his words, but Ben Parker had done something impossible. He had taken human mining equipment and converted it into weapons of war. Drilling machines became mobile artillery. Excavation vehicles became armored fighting units. Construction tools became bomb-making devices. Stop pacing and look directly at her. Doctor, you have to understand how shocking this was for us. We had fought many species across the galaxy. When their military was defeated, they surrendered. They did not continue fighting with farming tools and construction equipment. They accepted defeat like rational beings. But these humans refused to accept defeat. When we destroyed their army, they became an army of civilians. We took their weapons. They made new weapons from whatever they could find. When we thought we had one, they proved that the war was just beginning. He sat back down, his voice growing quieter. The leader of the civilian resistance was a woman named Carol Davis. She had been a maintenance worker before the invasion. She repaired air conditioning systems and water pumps, simple, peaceful work. But when the war started, Carol Davis became something else entirely. She organized teams of technicians who could sneak into our bases and sabotage our equipment. They moved through the tunnels like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before we could respond. Dr. Yilmoth stopped writing. How did civilian technicians learn to fight trained soldiers? Oh, they did not fight us directly, Doctor. They were smarter than that. They attacked our supplies, our communications, our vehicles. They made it impossible for us to operate effectively. Every day, more of our equipment stopped working. Every night, more of our soldiers disappeared. Kethver's hands began to shake as he remembered. The worst part was that we could not find them. Our sensors could detect large groups of enemies, but these humans traveled in small teams. 2 or 3 people who knew the tunnels better than we knew the surface. They could be anywhere, strike anywhere, vanish anywhere. We tried to flood the tunnels, but they had built drainage systems. We tried to use gas weapons, but they had air filtration equipment. We tried to collapse the tunnels, but they had reinforced the important sections. I'd already planned for it. He stood up again and walked to the window. Then came the day that changed everything for me personally. My squad was escorting a supply convoy through the main street when we heard sounds of fighting ahead. We moved forward to investigate and found something that still haunts my dreams. Dr. Yilmoth leaned forward in her chair. What did you find? Found a group of human children being evacuated through the tunnels. Maybe 20 young ones, all under 10 years old. They were being led by an old human man named Frank Miller. He had been a teacher before the war, someone who spent his life caring for children. Kethver's voice became very quiet. Standard military. Procedure was to capture non-combatants for questioning and processing. Children were not threats. They were valuable for intelligence gathering and population control. We moved to surround the group. But Frank Miller did something that made no sense. Instead of surrendering the children to save their lives, he moved to protect them, put himself between us and the young ones. An old man with no weapons. Facing armed soldiers, Dr. Yilmoth stopped writing and looked up at him. What happened next? Kethver turned away from the window, his 3 eyes filled with an emotion she had never seen before. Frank Miller had some kind of explosive device. Hidden in his clothing, when he saw that we were going to capture the children, he detonated it. The explosion killed him instantly. It also killed 3 of my squad members and wounded several others. But that was not the important part, Doctor. The important part was that the explosion created a cave-in that blocked the tunnel. Children escaped while we were dealing with our casualties. Frank Miller traded his life for the lives of those young ones. He sat back down heavily. I could not understand it. In Zephyrian culture, adults protect children by staying alive to care for them. You preserve your own life so you can continue protecting others. You do not throw your life away for a temporary advantage. But this human made a different choice. He decided that the certain death of one old man was worth the possible survival of 20 children. He chose to die so that others might live.
Doctor.
Yilmoth set down her datapad. How did this affect you? It was the first time I had seen what humans call sacrifice in its purest form. Not dying in battle for military objectives, not dying by accident during combat, choosing to die for abstract concepts like hope and future possibilities. Kethver's voice grew even quieter. After that day, the war became different for me. Every time we captured a position, I wondered what price the humans had paid to delay us. Every time we achieved a tactical victory, I knew that somewhere, Humans were making impossible choices to continue their resistance. The psychological warfare was just as effective as their physical attacks. They had a soldier named Rick Adams, who worked in communications. He would broadcast messages to our forces, not threats or propaganda, but stories. He told us about the children Frank Miller had died to save, described their names, their ages, their dreams for the future. He talked about the families waiting for soldiers to come home. He made us see our enemies as individuals with hopes and fears, not just targets to be eliminated. Dr. Yilmoth picked up her datapad again. How did these broadcasts affect your forces? They introduced doubt into our operations. When you see your enemy as a collection of individual beings with families and dreams, it becomes harder to fight them efficiently. Soldiers began to hesitate before firing. Officers questioned orders that would cause unnecessary casualties. Some of our warriors started to have nightmares about the humans they had killed. Others began to wonder if the war was worth the cost. A few even requested transfers to other assignments. Kethfer looked directly at Dr. Yilmoth. The humans were winning a war they could not win by making us question why we were fighting it. They turned our own thoughts against us. They made us see them as people instead of enemies. Tomorrow, Doctor, I will tell you about the day the human reinforcements arrived. The day we learned that the colonists we had been fighting were not even their real military. The day we discovered what trained human soldiers could do when they were truly angry. Dr. Yilmoth closed her notes. That is enough for today, Kethfer. You have been very brave to share these memories. Kethfer nodded. Slowly, brave, Doctor? I do not think I know what that word means anymore. Not after seeing what humans call bravery. Dr. Yilmoth arrived early to find Kethfer already awake and sitting in his chair. He looked different today. His 3 eyes were focused and alert, but there was a deep sadness in them that had not been there before. Today we talk about the reinforcements, Kethfer said, before she could speak. Today, I tell you about the day we realized we had been fighting children while their parents were coming home. Dr. Yilmoth sat down and prepared her notes. Tell me about when the human military arrived. Kethfer stared at the wall for a long moment before speaking. It was the morning of our 8th day on New Haven. We had been fighting the underground resistance for 3 days. Our casualties were mounting, but Commander Vextel still believed we were winning. We controlled the surface, had superior numbers and technology. Victory seemed close. He paused, his hands resting calmly in his lap. Then our sensors detected ships approaching the planet. Many ships. Commander Vextel was not worried. He thought they were probably human cargo vessels. Trying to evacuate civilians? Easy targets for our space forces. But when the ships got closer, we realized these were not cargo vessels. These were warships. Human military vessels with weapons and armor we had never seen before. They came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, like they had done this 1,000 times before. Dr. Yilmoth looked up from her notes. How many ships were there? 43 vessels in total? The command ship was called the UES Defiant. It was larger than our battlecruiser and heavily armed. The fleet was led by Admiral Linda Hayes, a woman who had been fighting wars longer than some of our soldiers had been alive. Kethfer stood up and walked to the window. But the number of ships was not what shocked us. What shocked us was their attitude. These humans did not approach like a desperate rescue mission. They approached like a superior force coming to punish someone who had made a terrible mistake. Commander Vextel ordered our fleet to engage them in space, while our ground forces continued the occupation. He expected our space superiority to handle the human ships quickly. He was very wrong, Dr. Yilmoth wrote quickly. What happened in the space battle? It was not a battle, Doctor. It was a demonstration. Human ships moved with precision we had never seen before. We seemed to know exactly where our vessels would be and what we would do before we did it. Kethfer turned back to face her. Their fighter squadrons were led by pilots like Lieutenant Commander Maria Gonzalez. She flew maneuvers that should have been impossible. She treated death not as something to avoid, but as just another factor to consider in her tactics. I watched her lead 12 small fighters against our heavy cruiser. By all logic, she should have retreated or called for support. Instead, she attacked with confidence that made no sense. Her fighters moved like they were dancing instead of fighting. He sat back down, but remained tense. Within 2 hours, Half of our space fleet was destroyed or disabled. The other half was in full retreat. Commander Vextel ordered all remaining ships to withdraw to the edge of the system. We had lost control of space completely. Part was not losing the battle. The worst part was listening to the human communications during the fight. Their pilots were calm, focused. They talked to each other like they were discussing the weather, not fighting for their lives. Dr. Yilmoth stopped writing. What do you mean? When our pilots were shot down, they screamed. They called for help. They begged for mercy. When human pilots were hit, they gave tactical information to their squad mates. They reported damage status. They wished each other good luck. Kethver's voice grew quieter. I heard one human pilot, call sign Ghost 7, get hit by our plasma cannon. His ship was burning and falling toward the planet. He knew he was going to die. But his last transmission was not a cry for help. It was target coordinates for other human fighters. He used his final moments to help his friends continue the fight, died giving information that would help them win. What kind of species does that, Doctor? What kind of people think that? Dr. Yilmoth made more notes. What happened when the human forces landed? It came down like a storm, Doctor. Not scattered across the planet like we had done. They landed in one concentrated force near our main base. It was a direct challenge. They were telling us that they were not afraid to fight us at our strongest point. Kethver stood up again and began pacing. The ground forces were led by commanders like Captain Greg Turner and Commander Steve Walsh. These were not colony defenders fighting for their homes. These were professional soldiers who had traveled across space knowing they were outnumbered, knowing they might die, but coming anyway. They attacked our positions with tactics we had never seen before. Not the desperate resistance of the colonists, but calculated military precision. They moved like they had studied our methods for years and found all our weaknesses. He stopped, pacing, and looked directly at Dr. Yilmoth. But what truly broke our morale was discovering that the colonists we had been fighting were not their real military. The people who had been giving us so much trouble were farmers, teachers, engineers, children. Their actual soldiers were something entirely different. The professional human military fought with capabilities that made the colonists look weak. By comparison, they had weapons we did not recognize. Armor that could stop our plasma fire. Vehicles that moved faster than our sensors could track. Dr. Yilmoth looked concerned. Were they more advanced than your intelligence suggested? That was the terrifying part, Doctor. They were not more advanced. They were more clever. They took their simple technology and used it in ways we had never imagined. They turned basic tools into sophisticated weapons through pure ingenuity. Kethver sat back down heavily. Then there was their attitude toward casualties. We had been taught that humans were fragile and would break easily under pressure. But we discovered that wounded humans often fought harder than healthy ones. I saw a human soldier named Sergeant Major Chris Johnson continue fighting with injuries that should have killed him 3 times over. He had been shot, burned, and hit by shrapnel. Emmy Zephyrian with those wounds would have been unconscious or dead. But this human kept moving, kept giving orders, kept protecting his squad. When we finally brought him down, he had saved the lives of dozens of his soldiers and held a critical position for 6 hours past any reasonable limit. Dr. Yilmoth set down her datapad. How did they keep fighting with such severe injuries? They had a medical officer named Susan Taylor who worked miracles on the battlefield. She did not just treat wounds. She somehow kept impossibly damaged soldiers functional long enough to complete their missions. Kethver's voice became almost a whisper. But the moment that truly destroyed my understanding of warfare came when I encountered their medics in action. I was wounded during an attack and lying behind cover when I saw something impossible. A human medic named Paul Anderson was crawling through the battlefield under heavy fire. I thought he was trying to reach wounded human soldiers. That would have made sense. That would have been logical. He paused, his 3 eyes blinking slowly. But when he reached me, he began treating my wounds. A human soldier was risking his life to save an enemy who had been trying to kill him moments before. He gave me medical supplies and told me how to apply pressure to stop the bleeding. I asked him why he was helping me. He said that wounded soldiers were not enemies anymore. They were just people who needed help. Then he moved on to treat other casualties, both human and Zephyrian. Dr. Yilmoth looked puzzled. This helped enemy soldiers. That was exactly what made it so devastating to our morale, Doctor. This human was showing us mercy when we deserved none. He was treating us with kindness when we had invaded his world. He was proving that humans could be better than us, even while we were trying to destroy them. That gesture shattered my understanding of warfare completely. In every conflict I had ever fought, enemies were enemies until one side surrendered. There were no exceptions, no mercy, no treatment of wounded opponents. This human operated by different rules. Rules that said even enemies deserved compassion. Rules that said being wounded made you a patient, not a target. Rules that said helping others was more important than winning battles. Kethra looked out the window one more time. After that day, Doctor, I could not fight humans the same way. Every time I aimed my weapon at one of them, I remembered Paul Anderson crawling through plasma fire to save my life. How do you kill someone who would risk everything to help you? Tomorrow, I will tell you about the retreat. About how we learned that human mercy was somehow more terrifying than human violence. Dr. Yilmoth closed her notes. Thank you, Kethfer. This has been very enlightening. Kethfer nodded slowly. Enlightening, Doctor. Yes, I suppose that is the right word. The humans enlightened us about what we really were, and we did not like what we saw. Dr. Yilmoth entered the room to find Kethfer standing at the window with his back to the door. He did not turn around when she came in, but she could see his reflection in the glass. His 3 eyes were wet with tears, something she had never seen from a Zephyrian soldier before. Kethfer, are you ready for our final session? He turned slowly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Yes, Doctor. Today I will tell you about the end, about how we learned that losing to humans was not the worst thing that could happen to us. The worst thing was discovering what kind of people we really were. Dr. Yilmoth sat down and prepared her datapad for the last time. Tell me about the retreat from New Haven. Kethfer walked to his chair but did not sit. Instead, he stood behind it, gripping the back with both hands. The order to retreat came on the 10th day of the invasion. Commander Vextel had finally accepted that we could not win. Our space fleet was destroyed. Our ground forces were surrounded. Our supplies were running low. We had no choice but to withdraw. Finally sat down, his posture defeated. But even the retreat was not like other battles I had fought. Usually, when an enemy achieves victory, they let defeated forces withdraw peacefully. It saves lives on both sides and shows good military sense. The humans did not follow this pattern. Captain Nicole Baker led pursuit squadrons that followed our retreating ships. Colonel Matt Williams coordinated ground forces that maintained pressure on our withdrawal routes. They did not let us escape easily. Dr. Yilmoth looked up from her notes. Were they trying to destroy your remaining forces? That is what we thought at first, Dr. Murder, but something strange happened during the pursuit. The humans had many opportunities to completely destroy our retreating units. They had us trapped in narrow valleys. They could have wiped us out completely. Kethfer's voice grew puzzled. But they did not do it. Instead, they seemed to be herding us towards specific evacuation points. Like they wanted us to leave, but they wanted to control how we left. It made no military sense. The strangest part was how they treated our wounded and stranded soldiers. When Zephyrian warriors were too injured to retreat with the main force, human soldiers like Sergeant First Class Pete Johnson would provide medical aid and safe passage to evacuation points. He stood up and began pacing around the room. His behavior was so contrary to everything we understood about warfare that many of our commanders thought it was some kind of trap. They suspected the humans were planning to use our wounded soldiers as hostages or sources of information. But no trap ever came. The humans simply treated our casualties and sent them to safety. They gave medical supplies to soldiers who had been trying to kill them hours before. They provided food and water to enemies who were starving and dehydrated. Dr. Yilmoth stopped writing. Why would they do this? We asked the same question. Dr. Yilmoth. Terry analysts studied this behavior for weeks, trying to understand the strategic purpose. They concluded that it must be some form of psychological warfare designed to confuse and demoralize us. Kethfer stopped pacing and looked directly at her. But I think the analysts were wrong. I think the humans helped our wounded soldiers for the same reason Paul Anderson crawled through battle to save my life. Not because it gave them a military advantage, but because they believed it was the right thing to do. This realization was more devastating to our forces than any weapon they could have used against us. We were being shown mercy by people we had tried to conquer. We were being treated with kindness by victims of our aggression. He sat back down, his hand shaking slightly. As we retreated through the mountains, I saw something that still haunts me. Human civilians were emerging from their underground shelters and beginning to rebuild their town. These people had just survived 10 days of warfare. Their homes were destroyed. Many of their friends and family members were dead. But instead of mourning or seeking revenge, they were working together to repair the damage. Children were playing in the rubble while adults cleared debris. They acted like the invasion had been nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Dr. Yilmoth made notes as he spoke. How did this affect you personally? It made me realize something terrible about my own people, Doctor. We had come to New Haven expecting to conquer weak, primitive humans. When they resisted, we increased our violence. When they fought back, we called them savage. When they refused to surrender, we called them irrational. Kethfer's voice grew very quiet. But the truth was that the humans had been showing us who we really were all along. They were not the savage ones. They were not the irrational ones. They fought to protect their families and their freedom. We fought to take those things away. The humans had been a mere doctor. They reflected our own nature back at us, and we did not like what we saw. He stood up and walked to the window one final time. 3 days after the retreat began, something happened that changed everything for me. Human diplomatic ships arrived in the system. They sent a message to our remaining fleet offering to negotiate a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Commander Vextel was suspicious. He thought it was another trick. But the humans sent Ambassador Ruth Clark to meet with our representatives under a flag of truce. She came alone, unarmed, to the ship that had been bombing her planet just days before. Dr. Yilmoth looked surprised. What did she want to discuss? Peace, Doctor. Not surrender terms or territorial concessions. Actual peace. She offered medical aid for our wounded soldiers. She provided safe passage for our retreating forces. She even shared technological innovations that could help both our species. Ambassador Clark spoke about preventing future conflicts between humans and Zephyrians. She talked about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. She discussed cooperation instead of conquest. Kethfer turned back to face Dr. Yilmoth. This response was so unprecedented that it forced our high command to completely reevaluate human nature. How do you deal with an enemy that defeats you in battle and then offers to help you? How do you respond to victims who treat their attackers with respect and dignity? The ambassador's final words to Commander Vextel were the most disturbing of all. She said that humans understood why the Zephyrian Empire had attacked New Haven. She said that fear of the unknown often leads to violence. She said that humans had made the same mistakes in their own history. He sat back down heavily. But then she said something that shattered my understanding of the galaxy completely. She said that humans had learned from their mistakes. They had chosen to become better than their worst impulses. They had decided that cooperation was stronger than conquest. Doctor. Yilmoth set down her datapad. How did this revelation affect you? It made me realize that humans represented something entirely new in the galaxy, Doctor. Every intelligent species we had encountered followed predictable patterns of behavior, acted in ways that made sense according to military and political logic. But humans operated according to different principles entirely. They grew stronger under pressure instead of weaker. They chose moral principles over practical advantages. They treated enemies with the same consideration they gave to friends. Kethfer's voice became almost a whisper. The most terrifying thing about humans was not their weapons or their tactics or their refusal to surrender. The most terrifying thing was that they had turned survival into an art form, warfare into philosophy, and sacrifice into strength. They had shown us that intelligence could be combined with compassion, that strength could be combined with mercy, that victory could be achieved without becoming monsters. He looked directly at Dr. Yilmoth, with his 3 eyes filled with something. Between admiration and fear, we had encountered dozens of intelligent species in our expansion across the galaxy. Each one followed patterns we could understand and predict. Each one had weaknesses we could exploit. Each one eventually submitted to superior force. But humans were different. They seemed to operate on a completely different understanding of existence itself. They had made choices about who they wanted to be as a species, and those choices made them unlike anything else in the galaxy. Dr. Yilmuth closed her notes and looked at Kethfer with concern. What do you think this means for the future?
I
I think it means the galaxy will never be the same, Doctor. The Zephyrian Empire built its power on the assumption that all intelligent species followed the same basic patterns. He believed that superior force would always triumph over inferior numbers. But humans have proven that assumption wrong. They have shown that there are forms of strength that cannot be defeated by weapons. They have demonstrated that some things are more powerful than fear. Kethfer stood up and walked to the door of the room. The war on New Haven lasted only 10 days, but it changed everything. We went there expecting to conquer a weak colony world. Instead, we discovered a species that could defeat us without destroying us, a people who could show us mercy when we deserved none. He paused with his hand on the door handle. Now, perhaps the most disturbing realization of all, Doctor, is that humans did not just defeat the Zephyrian military, they defeated the Zephyrian way of thinking, proved that there was a better way to exist in the universe. And now we have to decide whether we want to learn from them or continue being the monsters we have always been.